Okay, let's do it.
Hi, so my name is Kielmann, and I'm here with Liz Lipski, a good friend and colleague and a brilliant leader in the integrative medicine field. Liz, you recently published a new book, actually a new edition of your book. Do you want to introduce yourself a little, and then we'll have a little chat about your book?
Sure. Right now, my main position is I'm the Director of Academic Development at Maryland University of Integrative Health for all of the nutrition graduate programs, master's, doctorate, and certificate programs. And then I also am on some boards. I'm on the board of the American Nutrition Association, and I have a doctorate and some board certifications in nutrition and another one in functional medicine. And I'm lucky enough to also teach at the Institute for Functional Medicine and the A4M Metabolic Medicine Fellowship programs, where I get to help train physicians and other clinicians and how to really think about adding nutrition better into their practices. And then I wasn't even going to show this, but it just happens to be sitting there. And this is the new edition of my book,
Yeah,
Digestive Wellness, that just came out. So I'm pretty excited about it.
it's good you're showing it because mine's still in the mail. How long, how long have you worked on that?
I started working on it about maybe 18 months ago,
Oh, wow. Okay.
maybe a little bit longer.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the fifth edition. I wrote the first edition in 1995. It was published.
Wow.
And, you know, back then, I would go to these conferences that were put on by the labs, Doctors Data Lab, and what's now Genova Diagnostics used to be Great Smokies Lab. And I would go to these conferences and they would talk about these new tests that they had based on research. And the idea of leaky gut and the idea of a microbiome
Mm-hmm.
was all brand new. And I was like, wow, I'm so curious. Like, how do you actually put this into practice? And how do you make this work? And I went to the president of and founder of what's now Genova, Great Smokies, and Dr. Stephen Barry. And I said, I want to write a book on this because I'm just curious and I want to know more. And he said, wow, that would be cool. We need somebody to write a book. And they sent me a box of cassette tapes in the mail
Oh, wow.
from all of their conferences. And I also started looking on PubMed, which back then I had to pay for every single search that
Wow.
I did. And there wasn't that much there. So I'd sit in medical libraries. And I guess why I'm telling you this is it's like I wasn't an expert. I was a good nutritionist and I was curious. And I think, you know, when we get an idea, it's so important sometimes to just follow up with it,
Yeah.
you know, and say, well, I'm good enough to do this. You know, I want to do it and I have this idea for it. And why not do it?
That's really encouraging in any field if you want to produce something or even if you want to change your health, right?
Yeah.
Don't be discouraged. So your title is Digestive Wellness, and I would say maybe it's a title that on a superficial glance, you may just pass by it and be like, oh yeah, digestive wellness, whatever. But can you tell us a little bit why it is so important and why we nutritionists see this every single day in our offices?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Most of you are familiar with food, right? We eat it every day. And the reason why we eat food, despite all of the other reasons why we eat food, which are social and because it tastes good and because we're having a bad day and we need chocolate chip cookies or whatever it is.
Mhm.
But the main reason why we eat food is so that we can nourish every tissue and cell in our bodies. And so when that gets compromised in any way, the digestive system doesn't work right, which means that then your heart doesn't work right and your brain doesn't work right and your muscles don't work right because they didn't get the nourishment they need.
Mhm.
And as a nutritionist, you and I both know that where we start always with people is, well, if we could just get people eating the right food, like real food and a whole foods diet, then most people are going to feel a lot better and some people are going to feel remarkably better, most people.
Mhm.
And from current research, we know that what Americans are eating right now, 71% of what we're eating is ultra processed.
Mhm.
So we're not getting the nutrients we need to the tissues. And so we're starting to see a lot of people who have, and one of the first places we start to see people have problems when they're a little bit malnourished is in mood and energy.
Mm-hmm.
And almost, how many people are depressed or anxious or tired? All of us, right?
Yeah, who doesn't?
And then the other, and then the other thing is that digestive issues themselves are really the number one reason why people see doctors, because most of the time the digestive system, you're not supposed to notice it. If you're noticing it, there's something wrong.
Yes.
Right?
I explain that to a lot of people. And we grew up in this separated thinking, in this system in boxes, thinking in boxes and thinking, okay, if there's a brain problem, it's a brain problem. If there's a heart problem, it's a heart problem. So there are still people out there that may not understand the connection between digestion and all the other body parts. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit.
Sure. Well, as I said before, the main thing is that we need, for example, your muscles need magnesium, your heart needs magnesium, your heart needs carnitine, which comes from meat. So if you can't, if you don't have those in your diet, your body can't make them. That's why they're called nutrients.
Mm-hmm.
But also, even sometimes people eat the right things, but they can't digest those foods because they don't have enough enzymes or they don't have enough gastric acid. And the reason that can be is because they've just been stressed for so long, or because they have H. pylori infection in their stomach, or, it takes a lot of energy to make the stomach acid. It's like turning water into acid that's so powerful that it would burn your skin. And that takes a lot of energy. So if we're running around and we've got a lot of stress, it doesn't happen very well. And the same thing for digestive enzymes. If we have any kind of little bit of damage to the cells of our small intestine, then we don't really produce the enzymes the right way. We don't get the messages to the pancreas to stimulate that. And so a lot of people have enzyme insufficiencies. And then I think the third and probably one of the most important pieces is that the small intestine, which is after the food leaves your stomach, it goes into the small intestine, which is about 20 feet long. And it's like this big hose. And all the way down through it, we're digesting food. And we're breaking that food into tiny little molecules so that we can actually absorb it into our bloodstream. And a lot of people end up with what we call leaky gut. It's almost like the cells of your small intestine are supposed to sit there really tightly. But what happens if you sprain your ankle or something and you get swelling? It pushes, there's fluid there and it pushes it open, right? And so that can happen when we have inflammation, or when people have celiac disease and don't know it and they eat gluten, or people who have bacterial infections. These tight junctions, they just kind of open a little bit. And what happens is we get food molecules that are too big to digest, which ends up activating our immune system. So we get food sensitivities. We get chemicals that come in from hairspray and food and all kinds of things. Those go into the bloodstream. And we might get chemical sensitivities from that, or mood changes, or pain. We also can have bacteria, parasites, and fungi that come in with food, and those get into the bloodstream. And, we can have other kinds of heavy metals or other kind of things that come in with our food, and they're just now in our bloodstream. And now our immune system has to start reacting to that. And so now that's kind of one of the bases of why people are getting autoimmune conditions.
Mm-hmm.
And, so I think that there's a lot of ways that digestion is related to systemic health. We're also finding, oddly enough, that the gut microbiome, which is kind of this new organ that's the size of your liver, it's about 3 to 7 pounds in weight. And this microbiome that's mostly in your large intestine or colon is really active, and it's always talking to your genes and saying, oh, you want more inflammation here? Okay, I can give that to you. Or, oh, you think everything's really fine? Then I'm not going to sound any alarms. And we know that the microbiome really determines whether we're fat or thin or happy or blue in a lot of cases, and can determine whether you have autoimmune conditions or heart disease or type 2 diabetes or fatty liver. I mean, it's we're now starting to see, even with chronic kidney disease and glaucoma, we're starting to see papers on the gut microbiome affecting pretty much every part of the body.
That is amazing. So basically all these problems that people run to their doctors for, and the doctors say, we don't know where this is coming from, we don't know what it is, we could maybe say come from an area where we're not that aware of. So we're not so aware maybe of our gut microbiome, and we don't have any pain receptors in the intestine, so we can't feel anything, right, if there's any damage.
No, usually in the intestines, what we feel is we feel gas or bloating, or we notice diarrhea or constipation, or that we just feel so much better after we poop,
Yeah.
but we don't really, usually unless you have gas pains, you're not really going to notice it as pain so much. But it's pretty, this is an exploding, I should say, mushrooming field.
Mhm.
And, every day there's something new that comes into my inbox, and I'm going, I'm just so fascinated. I'm just a nerd about this stuff.
Yeah, so that's so interesting. So basically for us, it's so standard. We talk about this all day long. So nutritionists, if you guys don't know, we're both certified nutrition specialists. So there's a lot of us in the country that are trained in these things. And for us, it becomes so standard. But I'm always trying to imagine, like, how is a person that doesn't know this? How can we communicate this, right? So the microbiome, what is the microbiome? It's bacteria, and how do they live? What do they feed on? Can we influence it? Can we change it?
I love that question. So the microbiome is a set of microbes, and we've got bacteria. We have as many bacteria as we have cells in our body. And we also have viruses, which, we usually think, oh, viruses, bacteria, fungi, they're bad, right?
Mhm.
But no, we grew up with these. We co-evolved. Bacteria were the first life on the planet, and they terraformed it for us. And
Mhm.
so, like if you make sourdough bread and you take some wheat and some wheat flour, and you take some water and you stir that up and you make a paste and you let that sit on your counter, you make a sourdough starter, and
Mhm.
the microbes that are in that rise your bread are the same ones that you eat,
Mhm.
you know? So we do have pathogens that make us really sick, but mostly we live in great harmony with these microbes. And um, and these microbes, the huge percentage of them live in our colon, but we have a microbiota of our eyes, and we have a microbiota of our eyebrows and our nose and the inside of our nose and our tongue and our gums. And like, even I read a research paper that on my right hand and my left hand, they're only 70% the same.
That's funny.
So we have these microbiota, and they're there to protect us. They're really an important part of our immune system, and they're also really an important part of our genome, because we know that for every one human gene that you have 150 microbial genes in your body, and
That-
they're always talking back and forth to each other.
That's amazing.
And and the best way to change our microbiome and make it better is food.
Wait, food? You mean the stuff
Food.
we do all day long?
The stuff we eat all day long, yes. And specifically, the foods that the microbiome thrives on are natural foods, and most especially what we call is prebiotics, soluble fiber, or resistant starch. They're all the same thing. They have different names for some ungodly reason, but they're all the same.
Okay.
And we find them in fruits and vegetables and whole grains like oatmeal and buckwheat groats, and we find them in seeds like quinoa and amaranth, and we find them in nuts and seeds and legumes. So, and especially in like root vegetables like beets and parsnips and jicama,
Hmm.
and which I love jicama. It's like sweet and it's crunchy and it's yummy. And then we also find them in just every vegetable, you know, cucumbers and zucchini and broccoli and lettuce and chard and all the other things that we eat. And so, you know, that's really the key to keeping the microbiome healthy. But we also have this paradox. So for those of us who are healthy, we want to eat lots of these prebiotic rich foods. But for people who have IBS or people who have an imbalance of their microbiome, sometimes temporarily we need to avoid those foods because people say, well, I ate all these healthy foods and then I just got so much gas and bloating, I felt terrible.
Yeah. Wow. So there's lots of points here. So maybe before we go into the diseases, maybe one quick summary. So I've read some data that it's estimated that up to 70% of the food we eat is not absorbed because we're not chewing, and it's basically our body's not able to break it down because we don't break it down physically with our teeth, and then it just feeds the microbiome and leaves the body. Can we talk about that a little bit and then maybe go into the diseases?
Yeah. You know, I think a couple things that you said are so important. One is teeth and chewing.
Mhm.
And the other thing is that the digestive system mostly runs on what we call the parasympathetic nervous system. It's why so many cultures bless their food or say grace before they eat or hold hands before they eat. It's saying, I am grateful for this moment and I am stopping my day and I am partaking this nourishment and I'm going to sit and enjoy the people who are around me and I'm going to stop worrying about all the other things that I have to do. And the digestive system runs so much better when we approach food this way. You know, Michael Pollan, he loves to say, eat at a table. A desk is not a table. You
Mhm.
know, the kitchen counter is not a table. Your car is not a table, you know, but really to stop and just kind of do that. And so relaxing while we eat and chewing our food and eating mindfully really helps the digestive process because, as you said, when we have big chunks of food that we kind of just gulp down or wash down with water or whatever we're drinking, then the stomach and the rest of the digestive system have to do all this extra work and they can't do it that effectively.
Yeah, I think I see that a lot, even in my own family and even with my friends. I had to force myself to really find out what exact chewing means, and I ended up chewing a lot, and almost until it became liquid, and then things changed. I couldn't feel the absorption, but I could see a change in the stool coming out and in the smell. Sorry for talking about this, but nutritionists always do that. So it
We
actually
do. We
made
love talking
much
about
sense.
poop.
Yeah, because actually nobody may be aware of this, but the smell of the stool can tell you a lot about your digestive health, right?
Yeah, you know, it doesn't smell fantastic, but you know, if you're eating really in a way that's working for your body, it's not really foul smelling. It doesn't,
Yeah.
you might not even feel like you need to put on a fan,
Hmm.
you know, but if it's really stinky all the time, you've got some putrefaction. Actually, you've got some rotting food in there.
Yeah.
Or maybe you have a parasite infection or bacterial infection that's making it smell really bad. And I love kind of asking people to look at their poop because you can tell so much. First of all, how often do you have a bowel movement?
Hmm.
And, you know, to me, even though, like, if you look at the government says, well, if you have at least 3 bowel movements a week, you're good.
Oh,
3 to 21. I just looked at your face. You don't agree with that, do
no.
you? What do you think is like normal?
I would say you should probably have at least one a day, is what I would say.
I would say 1 to 3 is
Yeah,
probably pretty normal,
I agree.
right?
Mm.
And what we know is that the average American, especially women, it's the average time for a woman from the time she eats something till it comes out her other end is over 2 days. And for men, it's around, I think, 36 or 38 hours, so a day and a half. And what's optimal is somewhere between 12 and 18 hours.
Yeah, and if you think about that, the fiber and the stool is the main way of getting rid of toxins in the body, and that we're exposed to thousands of toxins every day, and it's not coming out, that's really a scary thought.
It is. So, if you're not having a bowel movement every day, the first place to start is, well, am I drinking enough fluid, right? Am
Mhm,
I hydrated?
mhm,
Do I have enough fiber in my food? Which most people are getting about half as much as they eat,
mhm,
as they really need, as we recommend. And so again, eating those vegetables and beans, oh my gosh, just like having carrots with hummus for lunch,
mhm,
with, maybe with some I don't know, some fresh fruit or nuts or seeds or something, you're going to have more fiber coming in. Or, um, so, those are the kind of the main things. And do you move your body? Because
mhm,
when we're really sedentary, we don't massage like our intestines
mhm.
and they don't feel like moving. But one of the other things that I think really contributes to constipation is magnesium insufficiencies, because we know from government statistics that at least 70% of the population doesn't get enough magnesium. And I know you've seen this in your own practice
Yeah.
where someone comes in and they're really constipated and you go, I want you to just start taking some supplemental magnesium every day and just kind of keep increasing the amount a little bit until you start having normal bowel movements. And if you start getting gassy or have loose stools, then just back off a little.
Mhm.
And you've seen that, right? And they're like, they come back and they go, I love you, Jan, I love you.
You know, it sounds so simple. I mean, I don't want to digress too much, but magnesium is an enzyme that's used in sorry, it's a mineral that's used in by so many different enzymes that, like, why is everybody so magnesium deficient?
We find magnesium in whole grains,
Hmm.
which people don't really eat. We find magnesium in um, legumes and vegetables, and we find a little bit in meat. But I think, again, it comes back to when you go to a grocery store and you see what people have in their shopping carts,
Yeah.
most of it is just so stripped. And it's the life in food that gives us life.
Hmm.
And when we eat food that is not really natural or new to nature, it's giving our genes the wrong information, it's giving our immune system the wrong information, and it's stripped of nutrients and it's stripped of enzymes and microbes and all the things that we need to like be healthy.
Wow, so I have to admit something here. Before I studied nutrition and before I learned about all these amazing properties that all the individual vitamins and minerals and the fiber and they all have, I would say I was one of these people avoiding the produce aisle, right? So the produce aisle is usually in the outside of the supermarket, and there's a lot of people avoiding it. And now we're talking about eating more vegetables. Maybe there's two topics we could quickly talk about. One could be what is maybe the right percentage or amount of vegetables? Because if you look at a normal, let's say, burger you can buy somewhere, they put one salad leaf and one slicey tomato slice, and that's about it, right? So what would be a good amount of vegetables? And maybe another one after that is, how can we make it interesting? How can we make the brain, or how can we make us want to eat these vegetables?
Yeah,
Tough.
that's a hard question, don't you think?
Yeah.
Um, so the first thing is, one of the things I've done often as a nutritionist is take groups of people or take my clients to the grocery store, and we start in the produce section, and I'll say, everybody go find something you have no idea what to do with it,
Hmm.
or you don't even know what it is, and bring it over and let's talk about what we all do with this. Because, we all get into these ruts where when we were growing up, we weren't exposed to certain foods and we don't know what they are. And, so I think just being uh, exploring a little bit really helps.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount of vegetables, what they say, government standards say a minimum of 5 servings. So what does that look like? It's about 2.5 cups
Mm-hmm.
of things that are really solid.
Mm-hmm.
But if one of those servings is like lettuce, then it's a whole cup of that.
Sure. Yeah.
And they include fruit too. Fruit is also really good.
Mm-hmm.
But we've got this great study out of the UK that came out a few years ago. And what they basically demonstrated was that people who got at least 7 servings of mostly vegetables and fruits had a 25% reduction in cancer.
Wow.
And a 43% reduction in death from any cause, and 41% reduction of strokes and heart attacks. Okay, so my thing is, well, let's shoot for 7. And then we have kind of my heroine is Dr. Terry Walls, who had kind of unrelenting multiple sclerosis. She's a physician, and she used to work at the VA hospital in Iowa City, and she would see her patients in her wheelchair, and she was doing the best of medicine. She was doing the best of medicine. And she went to a functional medicine meeting, and she said, oh, well, maybe I need all these nutrients. And then she said, I wonder if I can get them from food. And she started eating between 12 and 15 servings. So that's between 6 and 7.5 cups of vegetables a day with a little bit of fruit. And within a month, she was walking, seeing her patients. Within 3 months, she rode her bike around the block. At the end of the year, she went on a horseback riding trip with her family. So, and she's doing research on this, and she's getting good grants. And so I think, for good health, I think 7 to 9 servings of vegetables and fruits. But I think the worse your health is, the more you need them. And so how do we get people to eat them? I'm curious, like your tricks for getting people to eat them, because I really love vegetables. So for me, it's something that I find that I crave. You give me a choice between a Caesar salad and a bag of cookies, and I'll pick the Caesar salad almost every single time. So, that's just me. But I think as you start eating more whole foods, the vegetables start tasting better. And I think some of the sneaky ways that we get our kids to eat vegetables is we puree them and we put them in soups, or we grate them really fine and we put them in macaroni and cheese. Or we put butter or cheese all over them.
I think
so you got to do that to start, I think you'll find that eventually you like them.
Yeah, so what I saw a lot in my practice is that people really there's a certain group of people, I would say, that really seem to have addictions to food. And I think this may be a subconscious thing. I think it's not talked about much in the public, that we can actually be addicted to foods like gluten and dairy and sugar and, maybe even crunchy foods. So I usually recommend people a good book for sauces, like a healthy sauce book, not one of your standard sauce books, but there's healthy ones, so that the vegetables that really don't spark the brain as much get spiced up by the sauce, and then the sauce kind of gets it in. And that's how I actually had to do it too. I had to really trick myself into doing it. I have to be honest,
I see that on your bookshelf, you actually have a sauces cookbook right there. And I've never seen that one before.
I looked a little bit on Amazon and I found this, and it's pretty good. Yeah.
Huh. I like that. I like that. Yeah. One of the secrets of sauces that I learned from a nutritionist a long time ago was she would make a batch of, let's say, pesto, or she'd make a batch of a cilantro sauce of some type, or a chutney, or she'd make a salsa. And then she would take them and she would stick them in an ice cube tray and freeze them. And then she would take those ice cubes and she would put them in, a container or baggie in her freezer. And then she could just take out exactly what she needed for a meal.
That is really smart.
And it cuts down, and also it makes your food more interesting. And one of the other things that I learned from her is, we think about, well, pesto goes on pasta. And she go, well, it could go on vegetables, or it could go on fish or
Right.
chicken, right? Or you think, well, salsa doesn't go on pasta, but salsa could go on pasta.
Yeah, we have
You
to open up thinking. Yeah.
or tomatillo sauce or something. Well, we think, well, that goes with Mexican food, but why can't it go on fish?
Yeah. No, I think if we get creative, there's some amazing mixtures of things we can do.
Mhm.
Um, okay, so I mean, from our perspective, knowing everything about, not everything, but knowing a lot about how the body works and a lot about these nutrients and what they do in the body, we would love to do preventative medicine, right? Because it's so much easier than fixing something that's already broken. But I don't know if you want to talk about this or if you want to maybe go into some diseases, because a lot of people, they really just show up when they're really sick and they cannot take it anymore. And then we have to deal with that, you know?
One of the things my husband says is we won't change until we're in enough pain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's like we don't want to. And I spend a lot of time with self-care. This morning I ran out and I went to Zumba. Yesterday I went for a long walk. I woke up this morning and I stretched and did some exercises for about 20 minutes. Yesterday I went to chiropractic. I think self-care is really important, because as I get older and older, what happens is that resilience that I had when I was young, I have to work harder at it. But one of the really hopeful pieces, and we see this all the time, and I know you see this all the time, is that for most of us, small changes get big results.
Mm-hmm.
So like what you said, we have people who are addicted to sugar and gluten and coffee and dairy products, and processed foods. So if we choose a kind of an elimination diet of a sort for a couple weeks, I've worked with people who in 2 weeks, they're going, wow, I've had migraines for 12 years and they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm sleeping better, my energy's better, my mood's better, my irritable bowel syndrome better, my GERD is better, I no longer have heartburn. Oh, and by the way, all that arthritis and pain that I had everywhere in my body, that's gone too. And so in 2 weeks, so often I make a deal with my clients, and I say, are you willing to try this for 2 weeks? And then come back, we're going to sit down, we're going to see what happened. And if I chose the right plan for that person, and there's lots to choose from ketogenic diet to Mediterranean diet to gluten-free to FODMAP to specific carbohydrate. I mean, there's lots and lots to choose from. But if we did a good job choosing the right plan for that person, in 2 weeks they feel so much better. And then when I ask and I say, so are you willing to do this another 2 weeks? They're so motivated because they feel so much better. They're usually willing to do it another 2 or 3 weeks. And then we can start adding foods back in and see what re-triggers their symptoms little by little.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's profound, right? You've seen that.
Yeah, I mean, I actually coincidentally healed myself the same way. I had autoimmune disease. I had no idea why. Nobody could tell me why. And I read a 100-year-old book by a naturopathic doctor who told me, or who told his readers that, maybe dairy is not the best for you. And come on, I'm Northern German, right? Like, we do nothing but dairy and bread. That's just a staple, and all my ancestors have lived on that. Why should it not be good for me? But he said, if you don't believe me, try 1 week. Try 1 week without dairy. It's not going to kill you. And I thought, you know what, I can do a week. It's really not going to kill me. So I had to start also making deals with myself. And then what I learned in the process was, this was a process, let's say, that took a year or more, but I learned in the process that this really nice feeling of addiction when you eat that food and you feel so comfortable, if you pay for that with afterwards feeling horrible and getting inflammation and feeling sick and your stomach hurts and all these things, it's really not worth it in the long run. So I retrained myself slowly, and I'm also trying to help my clients do that.
Yeah, and like, I can tell you, I like how chocolate tastes,
Yeah, sure.
right? But what I notice is if I eat chocolate, especially if I have even a small piece of chocolate like late in the day,
Hmm.
that I don't sleep well.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, we always have chocolate in my house, and I'll say to myself, that sounds good. And then I go, you know what? I really want to sleep tonight, so I'm not going to eat that.
So maybe that's all it is. It's they say where the awareness goes, the energy flows, or however you want to say it, right? So if we start thinking about what is the price for what I do, without becoming too crazy, like we're not telling people to go overly crazy, right? It's just you mentioned a lot of diseases, and if we can focus our attention to where we want to be versus where we are or where we were, maybe that is some of the keys to do these changes.
I love that. One of our teachers we use in the doctoral program that you're in right now is Dr. David Rakel.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things he asked people is, what do you want your health for?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's your meaning and purpose for having good health? For me, I want to live a long, healthy life. And I want to be able to go hiking with my husband into my 80s if I'm lucky.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I want my health for that. I want my health so that I'm not a burden to my kids. I want my health so that I can contribute to the culture, and I want it so that I can be with people who I love and adore, my kids, my grandkids, my friends, and my brother and sister. Like, I want my health for a lot of reasons. And sometimes there's somebody who has a specific goal. I met a woman and she had an autoimmune disease, and she's like, well, I want to hike to the top of this particular mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And right now I'm having trouble walking around my block.
Mm-hmm.
So what do I need to do to get there? Does she need physical therapy? Does she need to sleep better or more? Because most of us don't get enough sleep. Is she eating the right foods so that she's reducing inflammation? Because the food we eat is the most inflammatory thing that we do every day.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes us feel bad. And so, you have to always say, well, from all these levels, it's not only food, but so much of what our health is in our own hands.
Yeah.
And then some of it's not. Like, I have a genetic disease that I got from my dad that one of my kids has. We have this disease, and it's just there, right? So how do I live with that and also be at my healthiest so
Mm-hmm.
that it's not a big deal?
Mm-hmm.
I don't even really think of it, so we live in these human bodies, and they do quirky, weird things. And that's part of our spiritual journey, is saying, what's the teacher in this? What can I learn from this? And usually it's when our body's acting up, it's going, I don't like what you're doing, and I'm trying to get your attention. And first I made your knee hurt, and now your shoulder's hurting, and now you're getting diarrhea and bloating. And like, how many more things do I have to show you that I'm not happy?
Right. So in a sense, we have to learn to listen to this body feedback. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, we all have a lot of training in the integrative or personalized nutrition field, and we also have some goals, right? So, from your perspective, having done this for decades now, right? What would your medicine of the future look like? How would that be structured?
Differently than it is now.
Mm-hmm.
I have a dental hygiene model of health. So, when I go see my dentist, I don't ever see my dentist unless there's something really wrong with my teeth or my gums. And so for me, I think we need a triage system in medicine. So most people are dealing with chronic health issues. And for chronic health issues, I believe that the person you should be seeing is a nutritionist and a health coach and maybe a nurse practitioner or a PA. And that you walk into the office and they go, let's see your food, exercise, and sleep log.
Hmm.
And tell me about your relationships, and do you like your job? Or if you're retired, how are you handling that? Or tell me about your relationships. Some people aren't going to be healthy until they're out of their marriage
Hmm.
or until they switch jobs. So I think the medicine of the future puts self-care and lifestyle and food at the center of it. And not kind of like, oh my gosh, now you've got diabetes or you've got inflammatory bowel disease. Now you can see a nutritionist,
Hmm.
right? So I think we need to look at the foundational reasons of like why we're ill in the first place. And then we need to use medicine and surgery when we have acute issues or we have chronic issues that require it. Um, I am not opposed to medicine in any way.
Hmm.
Without it, I wouldn't even be alive anymore. So I think that we need to kind of put our priorities straight. And we keep hearing so much about how do we reduce costs in healthcare, right? If
Hmm.
we put people in groups, people who have inflammatory bowel disease, we put them in a group and we do a support group where we're educating them and giving them support, and they're supporting each other and saying, I tried this and it really worked well for me.
Hmm.
Then when we start kind of approaching medicine as a community way of taking care of each other, we'll get so much better results. Then I also think that what's really on the horizon big time is that we're starting to look at pharmacogenomics, and we're starting to look at epigenomics and nutritional genomics, and we're really looking at what do you, Jan, need that's different from what I, Liz, need
Right.
because of our genetics. And what we're finding is, you have and I have the same genes in every cell. But what makes a skin cell different from a lung cell, different from your iris, right? What makes it different is which of those genes are active and open and what we call expressed,
Hmm.
right? And so it's kind of like, okay, well, if I start growing lung tissue on my eye, we probably call that cancer or something. It just doesn't belong there.
Hmm.
So we find that with the genome, one of the first times I ever saw this was there was this doctor named Turkle, and he was in Michigan, and he started working with kids with Down syndrome in the 1960s and 70s. And he said, well, what if we give them really good multivitamins and we nourish them really well?
Hmm.
What'll happen? And he found that they could learn better and that they did better. Well, we also know that when you mainstream kids with Down syndrome in school, that they also learn better.
Hmm.
And so this is a genetic disease. It's a single gene, but we know that you can modulate even that very serious genetic disease by bathing those genes in the right environment and making sure that all the other genes can support that gene that's defective more effectively. So I think that that's coming down the road. And then also we're starting to do microbiome testing because as I said, yeah, our genes are important, but the genes that we eat in our food are just as important. And the genes of our microbiome are just as important. So, we often hear, oh, monkeys and humans are only 1% different in our DNA. But the DNA of like a cow is 85% the same as ours.
Hmm.
The DNA of a carrot's about 25% the same as ours. So when we're eating like real food, we're giving our DNA messages that really understands.
Yeah, I think that is probably something that would be helpful for people to understand, that everything is constantly changing and constantly adapting. So the DNA is reacting to everything that's coming in, and we can influence that. So there's so much we can do that we can influence. We're not victims maybe of our lives and our society and our genes. We have to really become active and become aware and start changing things. And then a lot of problems can resolve or actually can be prevented, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I think that we have a lot of people who are very interested in prevention. How many people are eating whole foods or eating gluten-free because they discovered on their own that they feel better without it.
Mhm.
If I had a headache, which I rarely do, to me that signals to me, oh, you didn't have enough water to drink today. Why don't you go have a couple of glasses of water?
Mhm.
Right? And so, naturally we know, like if you get a headache, some people will take lavender oil and rub that on their temples, and some people will eat some food because their blood sugar dropped. And
Yeah.
it's like, oh, I don't have enough blood sugar, I need food in my system. And so, we naturally do self-care. And I think, as nutritionists, our job is as educators and also as detectives,
Mhm.
because we also use laboratory interpretation of all these kind of tests to really look and see, well, does somebody have enough magnesium or B12? Or we use a nutritional physical, like
Mhm.
we talked about magnesium before. And sometimes when I was in practice, I would say, so do your muscles feel tight and tense? I know you're only having like 2 bowel movements a week. That's kind of a tip off.
Mhm.
Um, do you feel edgy? Do you feel irritable?
Mhm.
Do loud noises bother you? Do you ever feel like your eyelids twitch or you get other muscle twitches?
Mhm.
Do you ever have this kind of thing where a nerve just does a ping and you go, what was that?
Mhm.
And people will look at you and they'll go, yeah, yeah.
How do
And
you
you
know
go, well, right. It's like, well, you have magnesium insufficiency, right? And you and I know those kind of personalities of different nutrients.
that? Yeah.
And we're trained to kind of look at a person and look at their skin and their hair and their nails and ask questions and look at labs to say, aha, for you, you need more of this nutrient than someone else, or you're not getting enough of it in your diet, or, and so I think the personalization
Yeah.
of medicine is going to be much, much stronger. And I think that you and I are going to be people who contribute to that, not only by doing it and teaching it, but also teaching it to the physicians that we work with
Mhm.
and in the clinics that we're with. And as we go out and we train physicians, I think that we will start to see a shift in the culture.
Oh yeah, I totally believe that the physicians of the future, they have to learn nutrition, they have to understand nutrition, and we will see a dramatic decline in chronic diseases and healthcare costs. And then we can afford healthcare for everybody, because then when it's preventative, it's affordable. That is the nice part about it. Ah,
Yeah, and when people are taking ownership.
yes, responsibility.
Right now, I mean, I read this article a long time ago called The Pathology of Normalcy. And it's kind of like, well, the old model of medicine is you walk into the doctor's office, he or she says, oh, here's what's wrong with you, and here's what you need to do, and here's a prescription or whatever,
Mhm.
right? And the new model of medicine is that we're all on the internet
Mhm.
and that we're all kind of living in our bodies. I mean, I can give an example. Like I've been going to see this chiropractor like once a month for, a couple of years. And then I walked in and I said, this is where I'm hurting, and this is why I think it's hurting.
Mhm.
And then she's like, oh, now I can help you,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And so, what I learned from Dr. David Jones is he was the first president of the Institute for Functional Medicine, and I think a great visionary and a wonderful teacher and an amazing physician. And he said, when I walk into my office and I go sit down with the patient, if I think I need to know everything, that's way too much responsibility.
Mhm.
But when I know that the two of us, or if they brought somebody from their family, if we all talk about it, that together we have the tools to find the answers.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. So it's a partnership more than a talking down and dominating the situation. That's really great. So I think we have a great future here. We learned a little bit about the intestinal and the digestive system, and that it's correlated to autoimmune diseases and to mood and to all these problems. Is there anything else that you would really like to say? I have something in mind, but let's see if you have something too that you think hasn't been said yet.
Oh my gosh, we could talk for,
Right.
the rest of the day.
Mhm.
So I think we've covered a lot. And, I just want to say, every time we eat something, we're making a choice, like towards health or away from health.
Mhm.
And for me, choosing health almost every time is really exciting. And so it's a mindset. If it's my birthday, I might think that my best health is having a piece of cake
Mhm.
because, for me at that moment, that's my best health, right? But I think most of the time you have to really think about the quality of the food and how does it talk to your genes? How does it talk to your cells? And what does it really do for you? And so for me, food and lifestyle are the basis of good health.
Perfect. We'll keep it that way. That's the perfect ending. Thank you so much. Everybody, we're going to post the link to Liz's new book, and maybe if you're interested also to the secret sauces. And you can probably see Liz all over the place. You have something in store for us, I just remembered, that you may want to talk about that you're working on right now.
I do. While I was rewriting Digestive Wellness, I rewriting a chapter and I go, I wish I could talk about the research that supports this,
Mhm.
or I wish I could really talk about how I think about this clinically, or I wish I could show people how easy it is to make cashew coconut kefir or kimchi, and so I said to my husband, I said, I think I'm gonna like sit at my computer and just like make a video course.
Mhm.
And he said, no, let's like hire a videographer and let's really do it the right way. And so I'm just about to launch, I'm just launching a video course that goes with the book that is, if people want to go deeper. And we've got 29 videos, 9 cooking videos, about 40 different handouts. So you can use these yourself, or if you're a clinician, you can use them in your practice.
Mhm.
And I'm hoping that it'll help people to understand the way that I think better after 40 years of doing this, and that people will be able to help themselves and help others. It's called
Wow,
The Art of Digestive Wellness.
the art of that. I love that. So I have to say, I've been in Liz cooking classes. She teaches medical doctors cooking, if you can believe it. So it's amazing. And I'm a non-cooker. I'm really a food hacker. I don't like cooking, but Liz and her programs that she set up have inspired me. So I think for people that read the book and they start to think, wow, I would really like to get there. How do I get there? I think this class could be really a good thing. So we're going to post that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it was so much fun to talk to you. I think we're going to have maybe other occasions soon. And I think we're going to cut it here, right?
Great. Well, thanks for inviting me to share with you. And it's always fun every time you and I talk, it's always fun.
I know. Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.